Alright, hey everyone out there in Banjo land, Mike Heading here. Got another little mini banjo lesson for you. I did a lesson a few weeks ago on my right hand technique and wearing your picks, so I figured I'd better do a follow-up and talk about the other hand, your left hand. So this lesson is going to deal with kind of some of the basic beginner pitfalls I see with people with their left hand. Not using the proper wrist angle, using flying fingers, and I'm going to talk about some of the basic things and hopefully save you some future, learning some bad habits that you're going to have to undo in the future. I'll always preface this in my videos by saying this is just what works for me, so take all my techniques with a grain of salt, and everyone's hands and wrists are different, so what works for me might not work for you, but I would say give it a try and take it with a grain of salt, and hopefully it'll help you out. So here's my lesson on left hand banjo technique. Alright, so let's go over some basic left hand technique for the banjo. This is some tips I've picked up over the years that help me, and I'll preface this by saying that a lot of this stuff takes a while to work into your playing. It's not stuff that you're necessarily going to change overnight, especially if you had some bad habits that you've already been working on and you've committed to memory. It might take a little bit of time to unlearn some of that stuff. I'll also say that everyone's left and right hands are different, so this is just what works for me, so take it with a grain of salt and see if it helps your playing. Alright, so first thing we want to do is we want to make sure we get our correct wrist angle. This is one of the things I see beginners struggle with the most. The wrist is either bent back way too much like this or bent way too far out like this. And you want to find a happy medium in between those two. If you're bent back like this, not only is it going to, everything tightens up right here and up in your shoulder when you bend your hand back like that, but you're also, it's going to be really hard to play each string cleanly because you're going to be working against your wrist basically to play notes. Vice versa, if you're out too far like this, one, it puts tension up here again, and you want to be able to use the banjo, and you actually want to squeeze a little bit with your left hand to help you push down the notes. And if you're out too much like this, you basically lose your ability to squeeze the notes. So you have to find that happy medium in between the two where you're not too much back like this and you're not too far out. One kind of test that I do is I put my hand where I think it feels comfortable, and then I take the banjo away, and if it looks like, okay, I could hold my hand like that, then it's probably okay. Whereas if my hand's like that or something, and it's like, ooh, it doesn't even look like I could hold my hand that long, putting a banjo neck in front of it's not going to suddenly make it be really relaxed. So that's a good test, is again, take your hand away, and if it feels like, okay, I could hold my hand like that, then put the banjo neck back in and see how it feels. The other thing I recommend is having a little bit of space. This might be hard to see from the video, but I've got a little bit of space in between right here. I'm not gripping really tightly right there. I need a little bit of space there, for one, so I can move around the neck, but also, again, so I can let other notes ring out. Like, here's something you could try to start off, is let's take our second finger, because it's our longest finger. Especially, this will work good, especially if you're just starting out. Let's put it on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And we're just going to play all the other strings. And we're just trying to see how far that distance is. So again, we're not muting that string, and we're not muting it the other way. Again, if I'm back too much like this, I'm going to be muting that string, that higher string, and if I'm too far the other way, then I'm going to be muting the lower string. So you have to find that right distance. You can try it with each of your fingers. Try it on different strings. Try it with your 3rd finger. Try it with your pinky. Again, it doesn't matter what frets you're putting it on. You want all the notes to be able to ring out. Put them on all the different strings. Again, you need to have that clearance so you can get all the notes to ring out. So that's a really basic exercise you can try. We need all the notes to ring out cleanly. Doesn't matter what string we're playing on. The other thing you could do is take a basic chord, like maybe a D7 would be really easy, and do the same thing. I call it the string test, where you're basically just testing each string to make sure they're all ringing out. And that takes a little bit of practice, and just keep adjusting your hand. again, find that happy medium where you're not bent too much back like this and you're not out too far. I'm also using my thumb a little bit to squeeze, and again, you can see my thumb's peeking up a little bit right here. It's not bent back too much behind the neck. I can use that little bit of pressure to actually help squeeze those notes down. And I really want to keep my notes down as long as possible. The banjo doesn't have great sustain compared to other instruments, so we need to keep our notes down to help, again, to get more sustain. Otherwise our notes are just going to be too short. So that's probably one of the most important things left hand technique wise, is getting the optimum wrist angle. Because if you're back too much like this, one, it's just going to be really tense and it's going to be really hard to play. It's also going to be really hard to cleanly put down notes. It's also going to be really hard once you start moving up and down the neck, because the back of your hand is going to be rubbing on the neck, which is really going to slow you down. So again, I'm not holding the banjo at all with my left hand. That's another big technique thing. I'm using my right hand and my body to secure the banjo, or I'm using a strap. So again, really important, I'm not using my left hand at all to hold the banjo, which is a really common beginner mistake. You get a little bit more, you feel like you get more control when you're holding the neck initially, but long term it's going to slow you way down. Okay? A couple other little beginner mistakes I see all the time is the flying fingers. Okay? So the farther you bring your finger up, the farther you're going to have to go back down. So, it's very common, and sometimes people don't even realize they're doing it, is after you put down a note, your finger pops way up, and I'm kind of exaggerating it obviously to show you. I call it the flying fingers, where your hand does that, and you're popping way up. And notice how much further I have to go down. So the further I go up, the further I have to come back down. It also increases the chances that I'm going to miss the note. So what I'd recommend is practice lifting your fingers up barely at all, and that takes a lot of practice. And you just have to slowly work it into your routine. You barely have to lift your finger off at all to get the note to ring out cleanly. And then I'm right there to go right back down to that note. So really important. Doesn't matter if I'm doing it even between two different fingers. Same logic here. So I've got to keep my first finger down when I add my second finger. That's also another really important left hand technique thing, is not lifting that finger up like that. See how I'm doing that? Like if I do a 2-3 hammer on, I'm not lifting my first finger up. I'm keeping my first finger down. Not only is that, if I don't perfectly execute that hammer on, I've still got a note, but also it allows me to go right back to that note. Like say I do a hammer on pull off like that. Whereas if I go, if I lift them both up, then I'm just creating a lot more work for myself. So really important. Here's a little exercise you can practice. It won't sound very musical, but it's really good left hand practice. So just do one finger for each string, or one finger for each fret, excuse me. So, and keep your fingers down as long as you can. If you have to lift them up a little bit to get to the next note, that's okay. And then go backwards. Again, it's not very musical sounding, but you're just practicing, one, developing your finger strength, and keeping these notes down. That's really going to help your sustain. And again, it takes work to develop that practice habit, but once you get it down, you have so much less work for yourself because you're not lifting up fingers that you don't need to. That's probably one of the biggest things I see beginners do, is that they just create so much more work for themselves because they immediately lift all their fingers up, and then many times you're having to put it back down on the same exact note you just lifted it up. Imagine I was just going like this all the time, lifting my hand up and down and putting it on the same note. So, when people talk about speed, when they talk about the flow of the song, those are huge things that really make a huge difference. Again, if you're creating all this work for yourself by lifting it and putting your fingers back on the same notes, it's going to be that much harder to go faster and that much harder to stay relaxed. Okay? So those are a couple really important things I notice with beginners on left hand technique. Is one, the flying fingers, and two is the wrist angle. And 3 is keeping your fingers down and not lifting them up. So you can do that all over the neck. You know, part of left hand technique is just developing some strength. So that takes a lot of practice, especially like with your pinky. Last thing I'll say about left hand technique is you need all your notes to kind of go straight down. By straight down, I mean this way. You can't be bent back like that. You need your fingers to go straight down on the notes. The other thing I recommend too is and this is just what works for me, but I kind of think of the angle of my hand is almost coming back almost towards my face. Whereas my hand's not pointing straight up. You know, I'm not putting down the notes like that because that really twists my hand in an awkward position. So I'm actually, again, kind of playing off to the side. Again, if you follow the angle of my hand, it's coming almost back towards my face, and I'm keeping that angle. Because again, once I have when I put down a higher note, whatever I'm doing back here is canceled out. So you can lean on the string a little bit. You don't have to be completely straight up. I'd avoid going straight up this way because, again, at least for me, it makes me have to crank my hand in a weird position. So I'm always kind of thinking of the angle of my hand is coming back toward my face. Like especially when I do like a C chord like that or a D. I'm thinking of it as kind of coming back that way, and that's what works for me. So try that with your chords. Again, you can practice keeping your notes down between your changes. That's really going to help the flow. If I lift everything off, then the sound breaks, and then I have to get my next chord. So keep your left hand down. Same thing if you're moving around the neck. You know, use your thumb as kind of the guide. That's kind of my last left hand technique is use your thumb, and I'm kind of keeping it always almost in line with my first finger. Like that. So say I go up there. So I'm kind of using my thumb almost as the guide, and then I snap back down to home base where my thumb kind of sits. And that's really important for when you go up the neck and then you need to snap back down quickly. Okay, so that's some basic left hand technique stuff. Again, keep your fingers as close to the frets as possible. Go straight down on the notes and always do kind of a string test, especially when you're first starting out. That's a really good way to tell, again, if you're hitting one of the notes and it's not sounding right, you need to adjust your hand. Alright, so hopefully that gives you some tips. Alright, good luck.